Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Well, as you can see in the title, healer interrupts are being removed in Midnight, except for Resto Shaman, as they're getting a 30-second cooldown on their Wind Shear. But literally everybody else is getting their kicks removed in Midnight. So I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about the updates they have coming in for raid frames. So first things first, yeah, they're getting rid of the kicks, and what they said is they made a change to all the interrupt abilities, increasing their interrupt duration for how long they lock out an enemy for everybody's kicks, but they're now going to be removing healing kicks. They say it can be a stressful role when you manage several things at once, your own healing abilities, your team's health, the enemy's actions, and we feel that asking the healer to monitor the cast bar of things they don't have targeted while properly using their interrupts was asking too much. In the Midnight Alpha, we've removed access to interrupts from all healer specializations except Resto Shaman. The talents will be replaced with other talent nodes for healer specs in a future Midnight Alpha build, and we recognize the significant loss of utility in some circumstances and want to make sure that content available to a healer is still completable, especially solo experiences, delves, all that other fun stuff, right? So what do I think about this change? Well, I'm a big fan. I've rarely long time have been a fan of either giving all the healers a kick, but preferably none of the healers a kick. And this is not the first time this has ever existed in the game. And, Shadowlands, I think, was the last time that most healers, except for Shaman, did not have interrupts. And Dragonflight bringing healer interrupts to everybody, way more defensives to everybody, contributed to a lot of bloat in the game. And it's something we've talked about on this channel countless times if you've watched any of my state of healing videos. The biggest thing is that the game is designed around how the classes work, right? The encounter designers design with what the classes have in mind. So if class designers power creep your class, then encounter designers power creep the game. That's why we had all this crazy burst damage, because there's more healer cooldowns, there's more personal defensives for everybody, there's more tools to survive, so they make it deadlier and burstier. Same thing goes for interrupts. It's no mistake, it's no surprise that Dragonflight and War Within have had a ridiculous amount of casters compared to a lot of Shadowlands and even some like the BFA dungeons that we had previously. They're more deadly, more bursty than ever, require more coordination and auras and attention and cognitive load than ever before. And we have more defensives, we have more kicks, all of that kind of stuff. They go hand in hand. I've seen a lot of people talking about how this is like taking away their skill expression or something along those lines, and I really super heavily disagree. For one thing, it's infinitely scaling content, and there's always something you can do better in a 30-minute dungeon, which requires, razor focus and incredible attention to detail when you're doing it at higher and higher and higher levels. So you can always be doing harder content when it comes to a Mythic Plus environment. And I also think for the average player, it starts making roles more predictable and more expected as to whose responsibility is what. It's kind of like the bystander effect when you pug. You're saying, oh, well, if everybody can get the kick, somebody else will do it. But when you have the knowledge, especially when I've pugged as a priest, when you have the knowledge that the priest ain't kicking anything, then there's the expectation that other people are going to be kicking it as a result. I've seen this so many times. We've done Zero to Hero series constantly. I did it on Druid in Dragonflight, and also more recently on my stream from 3 weeks ago. There's so many times where if everybody has interrupts, it's expected that everybody's going to be doing these interrupts. Personally, especially after playing Fellowship where healers did not have interrupts in this game, it was really nice, in fact, because you knew that interrupting was a DPS or tank role, and so people had to step up, and some of those encounters in Fellowship were literally pass-fail if you didn't interrupt. And being able to sort of tighten down the entire quantity of interrupts by taking them away from healers, it forces the encounter designers to have less kicks required in dungeons because less people have access to them. It's just kind of how that works. They're taking into account, your average defensive strength and the average amount of crowd control to determine what kind of damage they're throwing out at you. And by taking those things away, it forces the encounter designers to adjust their equation, because you can't make an encounter, and if they do accidentally, they'll fix it. That's what beta testing is all about. If there are too many kicks required on a boss fight, then they have to nerf that, because then it starts getting impossible. This, in conjunction with the pruning for a lot of major cooldowns and kind of streamlining a lot of healer specs. They did add Unleash Life, like we talked about in a previous video, back to Resto Shaman, which is pretty cool. They added kind of like a cast sequencing adjustment in this build as well, with Resto Shaman's like Ascendance to kind of encourage some like different gameplay. I can even find it here. They want you to basically like alternate between casting a Riptide, casting a Healing Wave, or a Chain Heal. So it's instant, and they apply Riptides to the targets, and their healing's increased. So you kind of like bounce between a couple casts, and you add a little bit of gameplay. So like they're taking in feedback, and they're making those adjustments. I think if we ever ran into an encounter problem with, too many interrupts required, that's going to be an area that they're going to make those adjustments for. So I think this is great. I think we've existed with healer kicks not being around in the past for M+, and in conjunction with less defensives, less major healer cooldowns, this starts slowing the entire environment down. You see it happening like when something gets taken away from your class, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with the encounters as I know them and as I understand them in the War Within? But we're changing the whole game. Like that's what a lot of Midnight is doing, is it's just changing the entire game and the entire environment. So I could totally understand if people are having a tough time visualizing where it stands at the moment, but that's where, especially when beta comes out, which they said it's going to be soon, you'll start seeing, the rest of the equation, because you see one thing and you have to kind of draw it to what the next thing is going to bring. All right, so I'm a fan. Tough toenails if you're not. Join the party. Next thing, their raid frame update. They get a little preview going on for like what they want to do with their raid frames, and these look okay so far. They're looking a lot better. They take it from a Resto Druid point of view. So keep in mind, this is through the eyes of a Resto Druid. First thing you can see is the stack of hots. You can see Tranquility, which is no longer going to be a healing over time effect, by the way. You can see Regrowth, Rejuve, Life Bloom, Wild Growth, and Iron Bark. So conceivably, if 6 is the limit, that could be a Germination Regrowth, which would be really nice. So you can at least see of like, oh, okay, you can have at least 6 hots. Here's how they're going to stack up. Here's how they're going to be, more or less prioritized. And you can kind of get a good idea of where those things are going. You also, through these frames, get to see somebody in line of sight, not in the instance, something along those lines with the new animation here. You get to see a better highlight for when people are poisoned. This one's okay. If there's like a drop-down menu where you can choose between like 2 or 3 options for how you display poisons and curses, I think that'd be great. But you also get to see the externals that other people are using on your allies. This, I think, is absolutely fantastic. Being able to understand without an add-on, without, Cell doing this, like you might say, oh yeah, like Cell does it. Like that's the point. Like they needed the base raid frames to show the same kind of stuff that Cell does. So having that in the dead center, I really enjoy, I really like a lot. I think that's just fantastic. It kind of makes me want to see everyone's major personal defensive active as well, but that, that might go a bridge too far for what Blizzard actually wants to show healers and everything. We'll see. But some of the downside is you can like barely see, if you zoom in real close, you can kind of see a bit of shading difference for an absorption effect. And you can kind of see it on a couple other people as well throughout this setup on the far right side. That's kind of how the absorbs work at the moment. Where if they have any quantity of an absorb on the base raid frames in Midnight before the adjustment, you just see a little sheen on the far right side. You don't see the quantity unless they're missing health. And then it's like their health, and then it shows the extra absorb bar at the end. So they still have to show what the actual absorb is. People are be like, ah, ha, ha, like that's Life Cocoon's real absorb. Yeah, people already told me that. But if they could actually properly show that, that would be really sick. In the rest of this post, I'm not going to just read it. I'll link it in the description so you guys can read. They said, yeah, we had feedback about the limitations in our frames. Actually, I'm going to read it. JK. While add-ons will still be able to significantly customize the look and feel of the frames, we are working on improvements to address some of the issues players have been relying on add-ons to solve. We're adding a setting allowing players to choose from 3 different layouts for the information shown in each player frame. The existing layout, this one right here, name top left, buffs bottom right, debuffs bottom left, dispels top right, will still be the default, but we're adding 2 additional configs inspired by popular add-on offerings. Wonder what those might be. For dispels, magic, poison, curse, disease, we're making them bolder so they're easier to notice, along with color and border visualizations. So right off the bat, this is a really nice start, and this is a really nice, opening argument of like, hey, we're working on it. Now, it's a little vague that they still want the add-ons to significantly customize the look and feel of the frames. Sounds to me like Cell's not dead, but it also sounds to me like there's going to be some kind of restrictions, whether that's going to be like targeted casts not showing up on frames. That's one I'm really worried about. Whether it's not going to allow you to set glows for priority dispels or something along those lines. It very much sounds like you're not going to be able to have like glows or sounds whenever a specific debuff goes out onto somebody, like a very specific thing. I'm also a little bit worried about what they're going to allow you to add to like a blacklist for like Warlock Gateway, for Bloodlust, things like that you don't really need to see on the frames at all. I'm not quite sure where that's going to stand, and I'm really, really kind of curious as to how they're going to properly handle that one. So I'm hoping that they have some kind of like internal category of like non-lethal debuffs, and you can just kind of check it, and then you won't see like Warlock Gateway or Bloodlust or any of those other kind of things. And that way it's it's like a checkbox, and you just kind of blacklist things that everyone kind of commonly blacklists. That, I think, would be fantastic. I would not be shocked if the future of raid frames in general just doesn't allow you to do quite as much as Cell does. Some of the features I loved was like targeted spells. I think they really should add this. Being able to see people's personal defensives and the duration of them on the frames. I'm pretty sure they're not going to allow us to do that, but, I can hope. I'm pretty sure they're not going to allow us to like individually blacklist, whitelist, or be able to, oh gosh, what was the other one? Like reorganize the order of your hots. I'd love to see that kind of happen, but we'll have to see. Also kind of worried for Dispriest mains being able to color your entire frame for Atonement. That one I think is super popular. I'm not sure if they're going to even properly allow that. That would require more customization than I think they might want. I'd really be a huge fan of it, or even if they just like allow the add-ons to do it, and you'd have to like make sure you have Cell if you wanted to color it, and you could run baseline, UI if not. We'll see. But those are some of my like incoming hopes, I guess I would say, for right now. Otherwise, this is like pretty hype. I'm really a huge fan of like the direction they've been taking so far with Midnight. Both from like how they're pruning classes. I'm really glad that they've been giving some extra love to Shaman. It's still very basic, but it's progress, right? Very big fan of some of like the opening arguments. Obviously, a lot of healers are pretty shaky right now because they take things away and they have to figure out what they add back into the equation, of course. But we're going to get a lot better of an idea once like beta's around the corner and we start getting into like M+ and raid testing, because there's a lot of the assumption of like how you think things are going to play right now, but then once you actually get into the dungeons, you'll get a much better idea of the flow. So I'm super hype. There was also like a speculation article, just to go on a brief tangent. There was a speculation article about the potential release date of Midnight, and they said TLDR Tuesday, March 10th. That was their like, we think it might be this day, This could be pretty cool, because then that means that you have a little bit more time than I was expecting. I was kind of thinking it'd be like mid-February or something like that. But with a lot of holidays leave coming around with December, and like all the Blizzard people just take off on December, or at least so I've been told, this kind of gives them a little bit more runway. So I'm really hopeful that it's going to be around that, early mid-March type of time frame, because that'll give them a lot more time to get classes in a good spot, because I'm sure it's going to be like bedlam once we get into like raid and M+ testing, and certain things are not working out the exact way they wanted to. The earlier we're able to find those things out, of course, the better. Same thing goes for the raid frames. If we can get like the opening use of these raid frames, and then they give like one more big passover for what they want to change around and like take in feedback and stuff, I think Midnight might be the best expansion since Legion. You guys can laugh at me if I'm wrong. I have a tweet and I pinned it on my Twitter. Laugh at me in 6 to 9 months if Midnight's not actually going to be fun, not actually be hype. But this stuff gets me super hopeful. I think the game is actually going in the right direction. I feel like Midnight is actually feeling like a really different expansion. And now that I've had some time to play Fellowship for like a week or so, I think the game is definitely going to be much more simple than WoW. But the steps that they're taking to simplify, streamline some things that have gotten way over complicated over the years is really nice in my book. It's like super positive for me. So hope you guys like it too. Let me know if you don't. Big love to our patrons, and check out the live stream. We're going to have more videos and everything coming soon on the YouTube. So like and subscribe as well. Take it easy, guys.